Hello, and welcome to the Mio on MMA podcast, reviewing UFC Vegas, whatever this is, whatever Apex number we are up to, and this is probably the most Apex of Apex cards because I'm looking down this card, and I'll be honest, the depth of the card is actually pretty impressive. We have, I think, only two debuting fighters on the entire card in the form of Omar Sy and Tuka Tukus in a 205 fight. Everyone else has fought in the UFC before. Although, to be honest, I completely had forgotten about Victor Martinez, so that's a bit of an exception. But everyone else has fought in the UFC, so that is good. But there is a general lack of fights that actually mean something on this card. What I mean by that is that there's not really a lot of impact here. Even in the main event, you have Barboza versus Lerone Murphy. And while Murphy winning would be obviously a huge feather in his cap, it is a feather in his cap against a guy who is almost 40, and this isn't heavyweight. This isn't even middleweight. So that might just end up being like nothing. And then a lot of the rest of this is like keep busy, two true outcomes, rehab fights for a couple of stumbling up-and-comers. And that leads to a lot of like lackluster interest in the fights for me. Now, I will say, the fights may still be good. That's something I always have to differentiate. There is a difference between an interesting fight and a boring or not fun fight. For example, I'm just going to pick one fight on this card that kind of like sums that up. For example, I fully expect Tom Nolan versus Victor Martinez to be a fairly entertaining fight. Fairly fun time. Get the popcorn out, get the chips out, whatever, and roll with it. But I also feel that it's going to be a completely meaningless fight. Or if it has meaning, it's that I just give up on the idea that Tom Nolan is going to be good. Which, to be honest, I've kind of already given up on. But that's kind of the thing, is it feels very regional. It feels like a fun time, not an elite product. And I know the Apex shows have slowly become not elite product, slowly have become the C show of the UFC. Not a lot different from like Dana White Contender Series in terms of fight quality outside of the main events. But it still does feel like a downer. That being said, there are some fun fights on the card. Let's get to it. The usual spiel here is I will talk about betting on these cards. I will talk about odds. I will talk about what I am doing with my betting. That being said, betting on MMA, not a path to financial freedom. I'm going to keep using that line because somebody used it on me on Twitter. And it just stuck. It just stuck as like a really stupid idea. But that's not what this is. It's a little bit of extra spice for what you want to do. MMA is inherently too volatile, too random, too unpredictable in a way to realistically go out there and make bulk buckets of money. This is just a little side thing that you can do and maybe even still shouldn't do. Basically, I'm saying bet responsibly. All right, let's get into the fights here. In the main event, we do have Edson Barboza versus Lerone Murphy. I like Lerone Murphy. I've always thought that he had a lot of promise and so on, but there is a frustration with him where he really still to this date has not taken that next step that I was really, really hoping and expecting from him. And now he's 32 years old, and I just don't know that that's ever going to come, that's ever going to show up. He is a well-rounded fighter. He can wrestle. He can strike. He's a good athlete. He's powerful. He's got speed. But there's never that dominant part. I mean, this is a guy who, in his career, very recently has like a split decision win against Gabriel Santos, who's not that good of a fighter, and then like wins over Josh Kulabau, which was competitive. A win against Douglas Da Silva Andrade, that's fine. That's honestly fine. But he has one finish in the UFC. Two finishes, pardon me. Ricardo Ramos and then like Makwan Amirkhani. I just don't count Makwan Amirkhani. If you finish Makwan Amirkhani outside the first round, I just don't count it. Like that just happens. He just gasses himself. And like despite being like ticking all the boxes of fun. It's just or top end hype material. It just he doesn't cross that threshold to dominance ever, even when he has the physical, the technical advantages, the game to do exactly that to his opponent. And now he's got the biggest challenge of his career in Edson Barboza, who is a simple challenge in the sense that we know what Edson Barboza is. He is a outside kickboxer at his best. He can pocket exchange, he can wrestle, he can grapple, but realistically, those are not the comfort levels. He wants a very specific fight and has had a hard time winning fights that don't go that way. That being said, he did win a fight kind of similar to this in Sadiq Youssef, who's a guy who has the athletic abilities, is younger, is in his prime, is a good athlete, is a fairly well-rounded fighter, and Barboza actually looked pretty damn good in that. That's what he's coming off of. In a lot of ways, this feels like actually an easier fight because Murphy's probably the more complex, more diverse striker of the two. But I do think that he's probably just a half step down on the athletic scale. And Youssef does have a very strong grappling base that Murphy doesn't quite have at the same level. It kind of feels like a step down in that fight. And that's why I got to go with Barboza. It's just Murphy doesn't have the pace, the aggression, the willingness to define a fight that tends to take Barboza out of things. He tends to have a fight that his opponent is relatively comfortable having. And I cannot shake that feeling. I cannot. I know Barboza is 38 years old, and that is old for anything outside of heavyweight and 205, maybe middleweight. But he still seems to have it. He's not the super dynamic, very, very dangerous, very venomous Barboza of the past. He's not. I don't think we're going to see him throw out spinning wheel kicks for knockouts on any kind of regular basis, or even really try it. But he's still sharp. He's still fast. He's still fairly durable. The number of finishes times he's been finished is still very, very low. I mean, he's been on a rough run as of late, I guess you could say. 2-2 in his last 4, but losing to Bryce Mitchell is not predictive of this fight. Losing to Giga Chikadze is not predictive of this fight. Sadiq Youssef and I guess Shane Burgos, to a certain extent, are way more similar to Lerone Murphy than those two guys. And he beat them, and he also beat Makwan America. He also beat Billy Quarantillo. He somehow didn't finish Makwan Americani. That is concerning. But I had him beating Dan Ige back in 2020. His record at featherweight, in my opinion, has been pretty good. It's 4-3 on paper, but I think it A should be 5-2, and B, Bryce Mitchell and Giga Chikadze are very, very unique style of opponents. So I'm going to go with Barboza by decision. I think that if you're going to beat him, it either has to be very wrestling heavy or be a guy who gets finishes, and that's not Murphy. It's just not. It wouldn't surprise me at all. It wouldn't surprise me if Barboza comes out there and just looks old. It wouldn't surprise me if Murphy is all right, I have a guy that I've seen people beat, and I've seen how this works, and I've seen how to make this happen, and I'm going to go do that. Because I've been waiting for him to do that for a while. I've really been waiting for him to do that for a while. It just feels like if you can match his physicality, you can beat him or at least have a very, very close fight with him. And Barboza does more than match his physicality. He also brings a dynamic striking game that I think will carry the day. So Barboza by decision. He is the underdog at plus 115 to plus 124. I totally get that. I understand that. I'm going to understand why any fighter over 35 years old is an underdog, frankly. And I say this as a 37-year-old. For the record, I am old by fighter standards. It is just a thing that happens. Murphy is a minus 140 to minus 150 favorite. I get the odds. I just still can't shake the feeling that while Murphy has every single tool that you would want to beat Barboza, he doesn't put it together in the aggressive, high-paced, breaking manner that I would like to see. It's a little bit too willing to fight at someone else's tempo, a little bit too willing to fight somebody else's fight. Chaos Williams versus Carlston Harris. Talk about pace. Chaos Williams. For how he looks, like 6 foot tall, 170er, bricked up, all that, you would not expect this guy to have the pace that he has, but he does have it. He has all the physical attributes that you could really want. He's durable, has great cardio, has power, speed. He's very, very predictable. I mean, it's why he doesn't really get knockouts particularly. I should look at his record before I actually say that. But I think outside of knocking out Alex Morono and Abdul Razak Al Hassan out of the bat, very, very early, mind you, and also Miguel Baeza. But Miguel Baeza has some serious like chin issues. But you look at the fight with Matthew Semmelsberger and Rolando Bedoya, same kind of thing, and even the losses to Randy Bound and Michel Pereira, the same thing kind of happens, is that he is kind of predictable. Like, he's just going to keep a pace on you, and there's not a lot of change-up, not a lot of dynamicism, not a lot of variability to how he does it. So if you can survive the early going and just not get overwhelmed, you'll probably go the distance. And in Carlston Harris, you have a similarly athletically gifted guy, but a very unstructured game. He's just kind of violence on wheels, so to speak. Violence on legs. I don't know where I'm going with that one. That was a bad one. But he's just going to be kind of chaotic and kind of dynamic and whatever. But like, one has to think that Williams can break that down and just outpace Harris. And Harris is also a guy who's been very, very used to having a size advantage over people. He is 6 feet tall. He does have a 76-inch reach. At welterweight, that is quite large. But he is the smaller fighter here. Chaos Williams is the bigger guy, 1 inch of reach. I suspect probably cuts a little bit more weight, just like kind of looking at the two of them side by side, like picture-wise. Just looks a little thicker, a little bit more dense in terms of weight. It wouldn't surprise me if maybe he's cutting from, like, I don't know, 180, 190-ish, whereas Harris is coming down from, like, I don't know, 185-ish, 180-ish maybe. Yeah, I got to go with Williams. I don't really see how Harris wins a fight where he's at physical parity and a guy who is actually like really, really legitimately durable and doesn't, and also like isn't going to get until is going to bring a wet blanket to the fight that just kind of suffocates the offense that Harris otherwise relies upon, being kind of like kooky. So I've got Williams. Like I said, decision. He's the favorite. Minus 125 to minus 136. Might put a little money on that. Harris is plus 105 to plus 115. Ramiz Brahimov versus Themba Gorimbo. See, this doesn't feel like a main event fight here. In Brahimov's case, you have a guy who's coming off of, I think, 2 years on the shelf, something like that. He's been away for a while and has lost, generally speaking, to every like named opponent that he has had, and has beaten guys who are just not very good. Like, if I pull up his record, what would I say is Ramiz Brahimov's best win? It's actually worse than I thought. I thought there would be at least a name that jumps out at me, but it's probably Sasha Platnikov. Other than that, it's losing to Court McGee and Max Griffin, who and Evan Cutts and Justin Patterson, and all of those fights are like competitive fights. The only time he's been finished was his ear exploding against Max Griffin, who's, you know, a good fighter, a pretty good athlete. You know, at one point was thought to be really going to do something in the UFC, and then I think everyone realized he was actually a lot older than we generally thought he was. But at the same time, he's fighting against Themba Gorimbo, who has had a really, really impressive run lately. The win that he had last time out, I want to say it was a slam. I'm gonna look. I'm recalling. No, it was overhand right to ground and pound against Pete Rodriguez and like the win over Takeshi Sato. So he's on like a decent run, probably a better run than Brahimov has ever been on. But those are guys uniquely able to be beaten by him. In Sato's case, it's a flawed game that is very, very back foot, very, very relying on one hot shot counterpunch. Like, It has no volume to it. It has no aggression to it. It has no definitiveness on the fight, decisive force on the fight. It's just very, very, you can do what you want and put up a lot of volume against me. And as long as you're a decent athlete, you'll probably win. And that was how Garimbo beat him. And then, of course, Pete Rodriguez is just not very good. Very, very raw for one thing, and also like kind of small for the weight class. So you have Brahima, who is probably the physically most durable and the toughest style matchup because he's going to bring a takedown game similar to, like, for example, what AJ Fletcher did when he beat Themba Garimbo. To Themba Garimbo. But Themba Garimbo has all the hype and all the running. He's got financial backing for the first time in his career. He's at a good gym, hopefully developing, hopefully becoming better, hopefully tapping into what was obviously a decent physical ability, 6'1", 77 inches, at welterweight, quite large, quite athletic for the division, has a touching story, kind of has a little bit of the Francis Ngannou tale. I can't get past the sort of emotional tug to pick Garimbo because for a couple of reasons. Because Garimbo, I think, maybe is heading places. I don't think Brahima is. This is the level Brahima has gotten to. He will get no higher. And with Garimbo, there's the palatable vibe that he is actually learning, getting better, and becoming something that he's 33, so like not that high, but like something that we might remember in a couple of years as a feel-good story. So I'm going with Garimbo by decision, but part of me is also kicking myself because like this is the stylistic matchup that Garimbo has lost in the past. This is the most similar to AJ Fletcher, whom he lost to. It is similar to Dave Mazzani, who he lost to. And there isn't really a win I can point to that was this dynamic of a grinding, durable grappler against him. But maybe it's just like I think the UFC is hoping he wins that is like swaying me here. But like I don't really ever trust them to do much correct about building prospects. Garimbo is the favorite, so I am not the only one being taken in by the vibes, by the hope, the potential of Garimbo. He's minus 135 to minus 148. Brahima plus 114 to plus 124. It would probably be smarter to bet on Brahima at this point because he's the underdog. And if there is an underdog on this card that presents a lot of stylistic issues for the guy that is favored against him, it is Brahima. Adrian Yanez versus Vinicius Salvador, I essentially broke down before when I don't remember who it was now, but like there was a bantamweight who had a fight and I was like, he should fight Yanez, and yes, I'm picking Yanez to beat Salvador. And nothing has changed, obviously. Salvador is a mess. He has got some dynamic, dangerous stuff about him as a striker. He is a reasonably good athlete. He is reasonably sized for the division, 70.5 inches. But like, I hate to go with like who he's beat, but like his best win is like literally Brazilian regional fighter Roberto de Souza or Shannon Ross on Dana White Contender Series. Like that's the high level opposition, and he's lost everything else. Whereas like Yanez, yes, he's on a 2-fight losing streak, getting finished by Rob Font, getting finished by Jonathan Martinez, but like that's Rob Font and Jonathan Martinez. That's like ranked talent. So yeah, Yanez, TKO, look for the power in the hands, look for the boxing game. Go for it. Salvador does not have a very good jab, which is something that he has struggled with in the past. He doesn't have the greatest range keeping tools, despite the fact that his kicks should be that, but they usually aren't. And yeah, Yanez minus 350 to minus 450. I'd probably avoid it at that odds, but that does seem right. And Salvador plus 275 to plus 333. Angela Hill versus Liana Pinheiro. I'm picking Pinheiro, and it's just purely a trauma response. I have at many times looked at a fight where if Angela Hill just avoids the clinch, she should win. And that is this fight. And then she doesn't. Like, and then she just does not do that. The Verna Jandaroba fight was probably the one that like poisoned me the most against this. But like I totally get this if you're picking Angela Hill. She is the better striker, the far more proven fighter, the more well-rounded one. And I don't really think Pinheiro realizes that she's not a very good striker. Like she's very, very willing to strike and sometimes will ignore opportunities to utilize her judo game and get into the clinch. I think she's a judoka anyways. It doesn't show in her run, but like I feel like that was what she was hyped on. And at the end of the day, if Hill fights smart and fights a good game plan and at 39 years old can still, put on some decent like evasive footwork, she can win this fight. She's got the better high volume striking game. She's the more technically sound one. She's very, very durable. She's not someone who gets hurt very easily. And all of her losses lately are to fighters that have way more of an idea of what they should be doing against her than I have any confidence that Pinheiro will do. They're Mackenzie Dern, they're Verna Jandaroba, they're Amanda Lemos, they're Tisha Pennington, they're Michelle Waterson-Gomez, although I thought she won that fight, frankly. They're Claudia Gadelha, they're Zhang Yan, and we're back to 2019. Like we get back to 2019 when she lost to like Ronda Marcos and Courtney Casey. Those are kind of similar to what Pinheiro is, but it's just a trauma reaction. Like I picked Angela Hill to solve the idea of not clinching a number of times, and she hasn't done it. So I'm just not gonna pick it. And if she wins, cool, awesome, love Angela Hill. So I'll be like pleasantly surprised, I guess. But I will go with Pinheiro, even though I think she's like a really, really, really non-functional striker. And she doesn't really have a way to make use of the judo game that I am pretty sure that she has. But Hill will probably give that to her because she has in the past. Hill is the favorite, minus 135 to minus 150. Decision, by the way, for Pinheiro. Pinheiro plus 112 to plus 124. I don't even know if I want to bet on that. I'm picking the underdog, and I don't necessarily want to bet on it because I'm making a pick out of fear and worst case scenario logic. And I never feel good about that, but I can't shake it. Tom Nolan versus Victor Martinez. Like I said, this is just not a UFC level fight. Martinez is not a UFC level fighter. He's a willing striker, but he got outstruck by Jordan Levitt. He's not super durable, not an especially good grappler, not particularly big. He's 5'8", 70-inch reach. Tom Nolan is like the exact same things I just said, where he's just not very good, but at least he's huge. He's 6'3", 73 inches, and reasonably athletic. Hits hard enough that he'll probably TKO Martinez, but I don't know. I'm not really looking forward to the fight on an interesting level, on a breakdown level, on an analytical level. But like it'll be fun because Martinez is a bit of a madman. So, excuse me, my laptop is decided now is a good time for it to throw its fan on. Anyways, Nolan is a prohibitive favorite, minus 485 to minus 520. Martinez is plus 350 to plus 380. I'm not going to bet on that fight either way. Martinez is a big enough dog that it's a little bit tempting, but I don't even really know what his win looks like. Like I very specifically knew what Nicholas Moda beating Tom Nolan was going to look like. I don't really even understand what my brain can't really comprehend the idea of Martinez winning. That being said, I'm never betting on Nolan at that kind of odds. Omar Sy versus Tukatokos, who is the two debuting fighters on the card. I'm picking Omar Sy. It's basically an athlete pick, essentially. Sy is massive, 6'5", 84-inch reach, athletic dude, strong, explosive, powerful, fast, reasonably fast. Not that fast, but reasonably fast. Sort of the 205 prospect cocktail in a nutshell. But I do really wonder because like his game is a predominantly takedown game. He's not a very good striker. I'm talking about Omar Sy. He's a pretty good takedown artist, but it's very, very physically related takedowns. Like they're not good positional, technical takedowns. But he has beaten Ildemar Alcantara and Luis Enrique de Silva, which is actually pretty good for a guy debuting in the UFC. Like that's two UFC veterans. That's kind of proven. It's as proven as we get. But he has a really hard time holding people down. Like his control game is. By the way, reviewing fight footage for him, there was a guy who had actually control as his style. That was weird. But his top control game does allow for a lot of sweeps and scrambles. And Tokus is a good scrambler. It's a BJJ brown belt. He grapples like it, I think. Like there's never a sense where I'm like, Tokos doesn't know what he's doing on the ground. And I also think that he knows what he's doing as a striker. Probably is the better striker of the two, just not a very good one. But a little bit fragile too. He's been knocked out, I think, more than once. So I perfectly see Omar C getting the takedowns, but I just kind of think it like ends up in a scramble, scramble, scramble. That being said, I will say this: C is not put off by being like scrambled with. He's not put off by people shaking him off. He like will just go right back to it, just keep going, and just keep coming out on top. That's kind of his thing. So yeah, I'm gonna go with C, but like it's essentially just a athlete horsepower pick where he is that special kind of athlete that can make up for a very raw game, and Tokos isn't. Tokos has like a very, very similar game, just backed up by not really close to athletic ability. C is a minus 500 to minus 520 favorite. I'm picking him by decision, and Tokus is plus 350 to plus 370. I would not bet on that line. Melissa Gatto versus Tamiris Vidal. The only concern here is Vidal is like a legitimate bantamweight, and Gatto's coming up from 125. And Gatto's game is like very strength and power based. Like that is her game. It's fairly functional, fairly sound, but it's not very diverse, not very dynamic. She is someone who at 125 is a beast, and I'm not really sure at 135. Although I'm under no impression that this is a long-term move. We'll see. Maybe I'll learn something on fight night, but I think this is just kind of like a late notice thing after her fight with Victoria Dudikova fell apart. But anyways, I am picking Gatto. She's the better striker. She's the more structured grappler. She's the more structured wrestler. Vidal is just not very good. She's just a reasonably athletic bantamweight sized woman, which will get her wins because it's bantamweight. But Gatto is an actually functional fighter, so I gotta go with Melissa Gatto. I do, but like this could very, very quickly be like Vidal's just too big, too strong for her. Like that could become like just very, very obvious in the first 30 seconds. But Gatto is better at everything. She theoretically she could win a boxing match. Theoretically, she could even perhaps even win like a clinching, like kind of grinding grappling affair. I imagine the boxing is probably the pathway to take, though. Gatto is minus 340 to minus 390. I'm picking her by decision. She's not a finisher. And Vidal is plus 260 to plus 300. Abus Magomedov versus Warley Alves. I do not feel good about this fight in any way, shape, or form. In the case of Alves, you have a guy who's a 170er, whose game at 170 was kind of based on power, and he's fighting a guy a weight class above him who is 4 inches or 3 inches taller and has a 6-inch reach advantage, but who will gas himself out or just or do what he did against Kyle Bahayo, which is pace himself to the point where like there's no danger to him at all. And neither of those really are like reliable paths to victory. Alves is durable-ish, but he's been finished a couple of times. Yeah, I could totally see Abus Magomedov just crushing him at the very, very, very beginning, but I don't like to rely upon that, so I am going to pick Warley Alves. He has the better structured game. He is a functional grappler, functional wrestler, functional kickboxer. He's just... I don't know. He's been a disappointment, I guess, in a nutshell. He's just been a disappointment. I had hoped for more from him, but I can't pick Abus. Just can't do it. Cannot pick a guy who I've seen gas out as hard as I've seen Abus Magomedov gas out. So Either Abus destroys him or Alves TKOs him late, or we get the worst of both worlds where Abus like paces himself and loses a decision. Anyways, yeah, Alves by TKO is my pick. He is the underdog at plus 220 to plus 240. I'll probably bet on that. Abus is minus 270 to minus 315. I don't know. That Magomedov name does some exceptional work, I guess. People are still somewhat excited for Abus Magomedov, and I understand that in the UFC he's only lost to Kyle Bahayo, who's pretty good, and Sean Strickland, who became champion. I understand that the loss quality is high. I'm just telling you that, like, I want you to appreciate that the win quality is really low. It's Dustin Stolfus. I'm not even going to try and say that name, but I think it's Kashyyyk in KSW. An 0-0 fighter before that. Like, his third most recent win is against a guy who has 0 pro fights before fighting him. His only win is against Sadabusi. And Sadabusi is a guy who at 170 relies on his like range and size. And fought a 185er who's large for 185. Like that's a recipe for him winning. That is the only thing he's done. So anyways, I don't know why he's that much of a favorite. This should be like even money odds. Pierre Rodriguez versus Rodriguez versus Arlene Ariane. Oh my lord, I'm terrible. Ariane Carnelosi, long lost relative of someone from the Discord server. This is kind of a mirror match. They're both like super powerful power plugs. Carnelosi, I think, is the more dangerous, more dynamic of the two, both as a striker and a grappler. She's the one that, if this fight gets finished, is probably the one doing it. Whereas Rodriguez probably has the slightly more sound, slightly more volume-heavy style of fighting, the slightly more conserving of energy, and therefore more likely to win over a 15-minute fight. They both have some good wins. They both have largely pretty good losses, frankly. I think if we look at this real quick, Rodriguez has 1 loss. Carnelosi has 3. Rodriguez's only loss is to Jillian Robertson, in the manner that Jillian Robertson tends to win, although I will say that fight IQ failed her there, because she wound up fighting exactly the fight that, Robertson wanted. And then Carnelosi's losses are to Lupi Godinez, Angela Hill, and back in her debut against Amanda Hibosh. It was Hibosh's debut too. By the way, it's always nice to see like 2 debuting fighters who actually went on to become something when they fought each other. That's always interesting. It's always fun. I'm going to go with Pierre Rodriguez for essentially 2 reasons. Number 1, Carnelosi is coming off of I assume injury, because she's been gone a while. I'm not aware of her being like pregnant or anything else that would bring that to the fore. Let me look at her Tapology real quick here. Do I see a bunch of... I see no canceled fights. So she hasn't fought since May of 2022 with no canceled fights. That suggests to me an injury layoff. And number 2, I guess I just favor Rodriguez over like a 15-minute fight that like she'll just do more and outpoint her. Like, not necessarily prove herself as the better fighter necessarily, but the better decision winner of the 2. So, Pierre Rodriguez by decision. She's a minus 210 to minus 235 favorite. Carnelosi's plus 175 to plus 185. Alatang Haili versus Clayton Rodriguez. Nervous about picking Rodriguez here for 2 things. Number 1, his journey up to 135 has not been very good so far, but it was Farid Basharat that destroyed him, and Basharat is something way more than Alatang Haili. And 2, he faded really, really badly in that loss to CJ Vergara, which has me worrying about his mental toughness, his cardio, his ability to fight hard for 15 minutes, because Alatang Haili probably will make him do that. He's a tough guy. He's an aggressive guy. He will put a pace on you. But I am going to go with it, because I do think that there is the potential for Rodriguez to be something special. There is just that high level athleticism where like almost every fight he does something very, very cool, and he's reasonably well-rounded, reasonably developed, all things considered. He's not a lazy athlete, although the cardio does beg questions on that matter. And Alateng Haile has just never really impressed me that much. Like he's tough. He's a nice prove it fighter. But he is the guy that you should beat if you're going to be something at 135. And that's why I'm going to go with Rodriguez. Also, Rodriguez pretty hard to take down actually, and Alateng Haile with like having to utilize his stand-up game only is not a recipe that I would say I have a lot of faith in. Rodriguez is the favorite at minus 150 to minus 162. I do see it going the distance. And you have Alateng Haile at plus 125 to plus 135. That's pretty close. And I think that does reflect the fight. That this is probably sort of a stylistic matchup that kind of favors Alateng Haile, but that Clayton Rodriguez has that athletic ability that could be just an X factor that proves to be way, 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 way too much for him. Emily Ducote versus Vanessa Demopoulos. I'm picking Ducote by decision. She's a prohibitive favorite at minus 340 to minus 370. Demopoulos plus 260 to plus 275. It's a true outcome fight. We have the striker versus the grappler. We have a striker that doesn't have a lot of power. We have a striker that doesn't really have a great takedown game. We have Ducote fighting somebody who actually, for a change, does not have a massive reach advantage over her because they are both 5'2", and Ducote actually has the 63-inch reach to Demopoulos' 59.5. So this pick will become either very, very wrong quickly or very, very correct quickly. It's that. It's can Demopoulos get her down and out-grapple her, possibly submit her, possibly pound her out, possibly ride out a decision? Or is Ducote going to get to work her high-paced, reasonably solid kickboxing, like technical kickboxing game, and probably force feed Demopoulos a couple of counter punches, counter hooks specifically, throughout the entire fight and win over 15 minutes? That's the question. It's going to be either right or wrong very quickly. Anyways, I'm going to quickly talk about the announcements for UFC 304 in Manchester, England at the Co-op Live. We have a main event of Leon Edwards versus Bilal Muhammad. Good to see that fight getting made. Not so great to see the co-main event be Tom Aspinall versus Curtis Blades for the interim heavyweight title because, frankly, you shouldn't be defending the interim heavyweight title when the heavyweight champion is available to be booked against. There you go. But John Jones doesn't want to fight Tom Aspinall. He wants the legacy fight with Stipe Miocic, whatever. Bobby Green versus Paddy Pimblett. Interesting. Mohamed Mokaev versus Manel Kape. Interesting. Arnold Allen versus Giga Chikadze. Interesting. Like, 3 solid fights that make a lot of sense. Outside of, I would say, Bobby Green, Paddy Pimblett, because I keep saying you should feed Paddy Pimblett to some young killer because you want to, I don't know, cash in on like that little bit of like stupid hype that Paddy Pimblett has and put it on to somebody else. And that's not really going to happen with Bobby Green because like Bobby Green's a little bit too old to build that around, but hey, whatever. And then at the Bellator Champion Series, we get the debut of Cedric Doumbé to an American audience. Apparently, this is the first time you'll be able to stream him legally in America. And he'll be fighting Julio Willis, which I think is an appropriate matchup. Costello Van Steenis has always been a favorite of mine, so I'm looking forward to his fight with Gregory Babane, even though I don't really think much about Babane. And then Patchy Mix versus Magomedov is a really, really cool fight in the main event. Bantamweight title fight. I enjoy that. I'm picking Patchy Mix to win that one. I'm picking Doumbé. I'm picking Von Steenis. And then further down the card, I do think Archie Coolgan's going to be the glass cannon that is Thibault Golte. I have a lot of faith in Coolgan to be quite good at lightweight, actually. And then further on down, you have Slim Trabelski, who I don't think that highly of, but it is heavyweight, and any kind of like, prospect is going to be fun. I'm picking him to beat Louis Sutherland. I'm also picking Mansour Barnoui to beat Yusuke Yachi. And then further down, I don't know. It doesn't really matter. I mean, I like Mike Schickman. He's reasonably fun, reasonably exciting. Aspen Ladd versus Ekaterina Shakalova is really, really weird because you have Aspen Ladd, who probably should be fighting at 135 in the UFC still if she could have sorted out her weight. And you have Shakalova, who is a 5'2" featherweight, and they're fighting at featherweight. It's very, very weird. It's about all the interesting things off that fight card. I would have given you more of a breakdown on it, but there is a certain finite amount of time when it comes to, tape study and so on that like I just could not fit in addition to the UFC. So it was either focus on Bellator or focus on the UFC. Bellator has like the best fight happening in MMA right now this weekend, and that is the Patchy Mix fight. But the UFC tends to, let's be honest, bring the viewers. Down below, you'll find links to my social medias, my video gaming stuff, and the MMA Discord simulator server. You should check that out, and I will see you guys after the fights.